It has happened again. We have had another horrific case of extremist, white nationalist violence. And the media wants to look at these people as lone wolves. The media wants to see these people as individuals who are troubled, who come to these decisions to do these terrible things on their own. But if you've been paying attention, like I've been paying attention, you know that these are not lone wolves. And I've, been doing, just coincidentally, I've been doing a little bit of research lately on this phenomenon, and I came across a term that fits the bill for what's happening here. It's called stochastic terrorism. The word stochastic basically means random, but when we talk about stochastic terrorism, we're talking about something that is basically random yet predictable. And that's to say that we can predict that something will happen, but we can't predict where or when or how it will happen. And so a stochastic terrorist is actually not somebody who commits an act of terrorism directly, but rather it's somebody who incites acts of terroristic violence through things like media, social media, memes, in any sort of basically communication. So that's what we've seen very clearly today with the Christchurch shooting. And it's not the first time we've seen this. We've seen it many times. Unfortunately, we saw it in my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina, with a church shooter there. Most of these examples of ethno-nationalist or fascist or whatever you want to call it, these kinds of terrorists, they're not lone wolves per se, even though typically they've been acting alone, but they're pressed forward stochastically by these stochastic terrorists. And so I think, it's time for us to stop underestimating, and I'm speaking societally here. Society needs to stop underestimating the damage and the power and the harm that these stochastic terrorists are capable of committing. When you have people in positions of power and prestige who are advocating for violent ideology, aggressively racist ideology, spreading misinformation about Muslims, about people of different races, as we see, there are real-world damaging effects. And I think we on the left have been aware of this, for quite some time. We've been victims of it ourselves. Leftists have been specifically targeted by these people. One of these people killed a leftist in Charlottesville by driving into a crowd with a van. So, maybe we've been more aware of this for longer. Maybe we've been taking this seriously for longer than mainstream society, but it's time for mainstream society to see what's happening here. It's time for it to be taken seriously. It is a fact that the most common form of terrorism in the United States of America, where I'm from, is committed by white terrorists. We have a huge social movement that we're up against, and it is a movement of violence, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. It's happening right on places like the Chan sites, the Slash Poll. It's happening on Stormfront. It's happening in the comments of YouTube videos. And if you look around in YouTube videos, they've been talking recently a lot about the wormhole for illegal pornography on YouTube and how links have been shared around and spread, for pornography via YouTube comments. Well, go to any World War II themed video on YouTube, even perfectly innocent ones. You can go to a History Channel documentary on World War II. You can go to, people who are just like innocently examining firearms and memorabilia from World War II. Anything that has to do with that era, go through the comments and you'll see they're flooded with alt-right, nationalist, racist drivel, incitements to violence, extreme anti-Semitism, extreme Islamophobia. It's right here on YouTube. It's right here in the comments. Go to any of these alt-right YouTube personalities, look at the comments. It's right in front of us. And as we see, this stochastic process of terrorism is incredibly dangerous. So this is a time where, unfortunately, the technology of the internet has really given these people a lot of power to do harm. So let's break this down, how this works. How does stochastic terrorism function? It begins with messages of hatred and anger. It begins with messages coming from, for instance, maybe YouTubers, these alt-right, ethno-nationalist YouTubers. It comes from these pundits on these, fringe media channels like Alex Jones's InfoWars group. It comes from a lot of different places, and it also doesn't just come from the top down. It also comes from the bottom up, things like memes. And we have people participating in the production of these memes. Some of them probably aren't even truly politically motivated. We have a lot of these trolls that are candidly saying that they're in on this kind of stuff, quote unquote, for the lulz. They're doing it just for what they see as the humor of making this kind of sick, racist, hateful content. But it all gets out there. It all goes out there on the internet. It gets passed around, gets shared around, all in good fun, quote unquote. That's what a lot of these people are saying, is that they're just doing it for the humor of it, and they're not taking it seriously. And that's the thing. We don't know, looking into that void, we don't know who's serious and who's not serious. And I think even they don't know who's serious and who's not serious. I think sometimes they can't tell themselves just how much they're buying into this kind of horrible nonsense until, in many cases, it's already too late. I do not recommend, and I will not encourage anybody to go and look at the quote-unquote manifesto that was dropped by this recent shooter, but clearly a lot of this Chan-style, aggressive, hateful meme humor has infested and poisoned this person's brain. And clearly, this person has been stochastically influenced by a lot of other alt-right media figures. Some of the names are dropped right in the document. Some of it you just have to kind of infer based on the language that's being used. But clearly this person has been heavily influenced and brainwashed by this block of stochastic terrorism that's out there on the internet. And then the terrorists themselves leave behind stochastic material themselves. These manifestos that they're leaving behind are stochastic documents. And that's why I don't want to platform them. I don't want to encourage anyone to go read them. I've read them myself just to kind of have a little bit of a journalistic, understanding of what's happening here. They are written to incite more violence. It happened with the Charleston shooter. It happened with this shooter. They're very much written in a way to try to incite and encourage other quote-unquote lone wolves to go out and perform these acts of terrible, terrible violence. It's a cycle, and it builds on itself. And that's the scary, dangerous thing about it. So the way it works is, once this messaging kind of escapes out onto the internet, it just kind of runs like a wildfire through the internet, through trolls, through YouTube comments like we talked about, and it just kind of explodes. And so then what happens is, there are unstable people out there. There are people out there who are prone to having their minds poisoned by this kind of content, by these kinds of messages. And so what a person can do, what a stochastic terrorist can do, is they can stand back. They can put out this kind of evil, hateful garbage that just poisons people's minds and fills them with hate against certain demographics, certain groups of people. Maybe today it's Antifa. You have to hate Antifa. Maybe tomorrow it's Muslims. You have to hate Muslims. They've done this. They've done that. You see a lot of anti-Semitic memes and comments and content. You see a lot of homophobic and transphobic content. But, it's basically like throwing out a fishing net. if I'm a stochastic terrorist, I can throw out my net with these hateful ideas, and I know that eventually someone's going to get caught in that net and they're going to act. And then I, as the stochastic terrorist, I can throw my hands up in the air and say, whoa, I didn't know this was going to happen. How could I predict that this was going to happen? I didn't tell anybody specifically to go out and commit violence. You know, they have this kind of plausible deniability going on. And you see it right now on Twitter. Go look at all the alt-right Twitter accounts and look at how they're crying crocodile tears, acting like they didn't want this to happen, couldn't predict that this was going to happen, distancing themselves from it. You know, but they're the ones that have been pushing and pushing and pushing. You see it every time one of these white nationalist alt-right terrorists commits a heinous act of violence. There's a direct link between this toxic internet culture stochastically influencing people who are willing and ready and prepared to go out and commit acts of violence. And so then the question I have, and I don't have an answer to this question right now, but the question I have for you, for all of us, is how do you fight this kind of violence? And the only answer I can come up with right now is we have to change the culture. We have to reach these people, primarily young people, who are out there having their minds poisoned by this garbage. And I don't know how exactly we do that. But the problem is that a lot of these mostly young white men are absorbing this stuff. They've been absorbing it their whole lives. I mean, think about when this all started. Gamergate was almost 10 years ago now. So now we have guys out there that are 20 years old, and basically from the time they were 10 years old, all through all of their teens, they've been absorbing this garbage, these memes, this hateful content, reading and making these comments on YouTube and on the Chan boards, and they've grown up with it, and they live it, they breathe it. It's the air that they breathe. It's the environment that they know best. And I'm telling you, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands. There must be millions of them. And a lot of them think that they're just joking. A lot of them think that it's just a meme. And maybe for you, it is just a meme. Maybe for an individual, it is just a meme. But they're contributing stochastically to the violent acts. Every time somebody shares one of these hateful memes, every time somebody makes one of these hateful memes, every time somebody makes a hateful comment on a YouTube video, encouraging and inciting people to anti-Semitism, to Islamophobia, to transphobia, every time somebody participates stochastically in that process, they are helping to activate another terrorist. And it's going to keep happening until we find real meaningful ways to fight it. I don't really have much else to say at this point. I wasn't even going to make a video this week. I've been kind of sick. But, you know, this has just been heavily on my mind. And I just wanted to get this conversation going. If you have any spare cash in your account, the victims will need support. They will need finances to help. I'm sure that, you know, I can't imagine what they've been going through. Money won't solve this problem, but it could give some relief to these people in this horribly desperate time. So if you do have money, I'll put some links in the description to places where you can contribute to victims funds. But we have to find solutions to this problem because it's just going to get worse. More people are being exposed to this toxic nonsense every single day. And until we can find a way to push back and turn back the tide, it's just going to get worse. So that's all I have to say for now. Sorry this video was not a fun one. Hopefully next week, hopefully we can kind of go back to normal. But it is what it is. I'm American Johnson. This is Non-Compete. Thank you for watching.